Greetings Philos 71. Thank you for posting the video 5 questions every intelligent atheist must answer. I consider myself an intelligent atheist, so I feel compelled to answer. You have gotten a lot of responses so far, and I agree with most of what's been said. But I feel I can offer a few more thoughts that haven't been expressed yet. Question 1. Aren't you using chance in the exact same way in which you accuse Christians of using God, hence, God of the gaps? The answer is definitely no. By asking this question you show that you do not understand what is meant by this phrase. The gaps that are being referred to are the gaps in our scientific knowledge. In other words, those questions to which science has not yet been able to provide an answer. God is invoked as a patch over these gaps in our knowledge. For instance, it is unknown how life on Earth began, or what caused the Big Bang to occur. A Christian would say that God created it. But what you must realize is that saying, God did it, still doesn't explain anything. Science is the question of how, not who. Even if God does exist, he presumably employed a naturalistic method. What was God's method? When atheists or scientific materialists don't know the answers to such questions, we simply say, we don't know. No one is saying that chance explains anything. Only naturalistic processes discovered by scientific observation explain how something happens. Chance may be thought to be a factor in that process, but it is not the entire explanation in itself. Saying chance did it gives us no more information than saying God did it. I think what you mean to say is that atheists are using chance to answer the universal question of why, as in why do we exist? This is not a question for science to answer. I will address this existential problem in question 2. But first, a digression. I would like to discuss the concept of chance for a moment. What does it mean to say that something happens randomly? To say that a coin toss, for example, is a matter of chance, is not to say that there is not a causal chain of physical forces that will, ultimately, determine whether the coin lands on heads or tails. The amount of kinetic energy I put into the coin when I toss it into the air will determine the arc, trajectory, and number of times the coin flips before it hits the ground. These factors will determine at what angle the coin makes contact with the pavement, the way that it bounces, and so on. So if the coin lands on heads, it can be said to have happened for a reason. At the same time, that does not mean that there was any intelligence behind the whole process. I didn't know just how to toss the coin in order to make it come up heads, nor did I telekinetically control its flipping and bouncing. By that same token, no pun intended, random mutations in an organism are caused by a mutagen in the environment, such as a chemical or radiation. Natural selection will then determine whether or not the mutation enhances the organism's ability to survive or attract a mate. If it does, the mutation will become a genetic trait to proliferate in future generations. Now, concerning probability, there are at least dozens of extremely improbable events happening to all of us every day. We just don't notice them. For example, just the other day I pointed my finger at someone, and at the same time that I thrust my finger out, a firecracker went off in the distance. A couple of weeks ago when I walked into a drugstore, the song that was playing over the radio station inside the drugstore was the same song that I had just been playing on CD in my truck. So what does it mean? That God wanted me to buy that CD? Or that he wanted me to be inside that drugstore at that specific moment? The point is that probability is irrelevant because anything can be demonstrated to have an infinitesimal probability, and yet, all of these things are happening anyway. The only reason why probability seems like such a compelling argument for the existence of God is because the experience of consciousness is such an intensely egomaniacal one. Question 2. Why is there something instead of nothing? I will answer this question in just a moment. But first, I would like to ask you a question. Why ask why? Philos, don't you think that in the face of all the overwhelming beauty and majesty of the universe that it takes a degree of impudence to ask why? As if the universe needs to excuse itself for you. What you have to realize is that there is a difference between lack of reason, lack of purpose, and no need for reason, no need for purpose. Life and the universe are reasons unto themselves. Now to answer your question, why is there something instead of nothing? I would answer that question with a question, what is nothing? Can you even conceive of what nothing is? Nothing is by definition a non-concept. There is no such thing as nothing. Why is there something instead of nothing? Because something is, and nothing isn't. Question 3. Where do I get my morals from? First of all, I do not believe in moral absolutes. I am a moral relativist. But moral relativism is not the same thing as amoral nihilism. Perhaps, in the ultimate sense, they are the same, but the moral relativist still believes that morality is useful. I agree that evolution can explain morality for the most part. Your objection, as stated, is that morality is prescriptive, that it entails a look forward into the future about how we ought to behave, and that evolution does not engage this fundamental core element of morality. Philos, the connection that you have failed to make is that if morality has contributed to the success of our species so far, then it is prescriptive. To put it another way, if it has worked well for us so far, then we should keep on doing it. My morality comes from the understanding that it is in my best interest to have a network of family and friends to help me get through the challenges that life brings. In order to build, maintain, and strengthen this network, it is necessary that I earn people's trust and respect, and to keep faith with them. If I go around acting like a jerk to everyone, my network will break down. No one will like me or trust me, and I will be left alone to fend for myself. I probably will not get to procreate either. This is an important point I just made. Because the one instinct that is stronger and more important than survival is the instinct to pass on one's genetic code. Knowing that we will all die someday, there is not much point in attaching more importance to mere survival than to reproducing. This is why it still makes sense, even in Darwinian terms, to say that risking my own life for the life of my child is a moral imperative. You may want to ask, if passing on our genes is the meaning of life, what about those people who do not want to have children? What is the purpose of their lives? What do they have to pass on? The answer is that as a highly evolved and intelligent animal, we understand that there is more to be passed on than just DNA. Knowledge, wisdom, and of course, morality are every bit as important to the future of humanity as reproducing. Now that I have answered question 3, I would like to speak objectively on the subject of morality. In question 1, I made the point that even if God does exist, there still needs to be a naturalistic explanation for the origin of life. Similarly, even if God exists, there still has to be a naturalistic explanation for morality. The reason why this is so is because, being the rational animals that we are, morality is something that must make sense to us. Because God says so is not a good foundation for morality, because it robs us of our own moral sense. In Plato's classic dialogue Euthyphro, Socrates says that what is good is loved by the gods because it is good. But what is loved by the gods is not good because it is loved by the gods. What this means is that if God does exist, even he himself is not above the moral law. And therefore God is not the moral lawgiver. You might want to say, hey, God is the very essence of goodness and morality itself. That is fine with me, but it creates a problem for the monotheistic religions. Because now you have invoked a pantheistic philosophy, and you are gravitating away from the objective personal God of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Lastly, I want to address the concepts of good and evil. These concepts can be understood in simpler terms, such that good can be taken to mean life, and anything that sustains it, while evil can be taken to mean death, and anything that compromises the future viability of life. These concepts can be broken down even further still, to be understood as creation versus destruction. But it is not always clear which course of actions will best sustain our existence and which ones will jeopardize it the most. Likewise, creation is not always a good thing, while destruction sometimes can be.